Hiya John, thanks for the footage. First of all, when I look at this when I look at the footage, obviously I can only deal with the footage that's in front of me. Unfortunately, I've not got you on the map to see the sort of shot pattern that you're creating. You're talking a little bit about coming over the top of it. This footage doesn't really show a tremendous amount of evidence of that in the traditional sense of the manner, with the right shoulder moving over forward towards the ball, left arm moving out, etc. But there are certain things that would produce the heel strike that you're talking about, and the sort of pull to the left. So I'm just going to go a few things or make a few observations based on the footage that you've sent me. Initially, this face-on footage, there's a little bit of wobble on the camera. Whoever's taking the footage starts to follow your club and you swing a little bit. So there's a little bit of wobble, but you sort of get the gist of what's going on by the lines that I've put on the screen. So first of all, put a line or a box around the head. Traditional use of that to see whether the upper centre stays stable. And I've highlighted the two measurable centres in your swing, which are the upper centre, centre of the shoulder turn, and the centre of the pelvis. Comparing you to Grant, you can see that there is a marked lean towards the target. A lot of players do this. They put the weight forward by moving the upper centre forward, as we can see with yourself, but the lower centre stays back. You know from your own experience following the system online and coaching it that really we need to be pushing the weight forward by moving the pelvis towards the target a little bit more. And that will create what we see here with Grant, where the upper centre and the lower centre are on top of one another, or the lower centre slightly further forward towards the target, which would be the norm. Most players have a little bit of side bend to the right. So Grant's demonstrating maybe, I don't know, this is not 100% accurate, obviously, because it's not 3D equipment, but you get the idea anyway. Grant's demonstrating a shift of maybe sort of 2 degrees, 3 degrees maybe. Someone like Troy Matteson might demonstrate a little bit more axis tilt at that point, created because he's pushing his hips further forward. Pushing the hips forward is a push piece. Having the hips back, as per your setup, is very much a pull piece. So that's the first thing I would look at, is pushing the hips towards the target a little bit at P1. I then start to consider, and again there's a little bit of wobble on the camera on this one, he starts to sort of follow you at this point. However, you can see that there's a tendency to move off it slightly. So what I'll be looking at here is, in practice, position a cane to the right hand side of your head. Very simple drill. Familiarise yourself with staying more centred during the backswing. So this particular piece of footage, whilst there is a little bit of camera movement, there is a shift off the golf ball from P1 to P4, which again, you know, you would want to tidy that up for obvious reasons. You can see that there's not a great deal of sort of differential between the knees. The hip turn tends to be a little bit too level at that point. That might not happen every swing, but it's certainly happening in the footage that you've sent me across here. So a little bit of a tweak at P1, push the hips forward, a little bit of work stabilising the upper centre. Like I say, simple drill, just a cane to the right of your head at setup. I was actually doing a little bit of work on that this morning myself. My movement is I bump into my right side, a little bit like JJ Henry in the DVDs. Problem is I can't get across to it in from P4 to P6 like JJ does, and that results in quite an erratic shot pattern. So really simple exercise, giving you some very positive changes, just stopping that head drifting off. P2.7 to 4, which is usually a sign that the extension and the left tilting is stopping and the turning is carrying on. So a little bit of movement off it that would need tidying up so that we can arrive in a more centred position like we see there with Grant. Much more differential between the knees, which means the hips are turning on a more tilted angle. That's the left tilt. You can then extend as much as you want without moving off the golf ball. or turn and extend as much as you want, should I say, without moving off the golf ball. So cane at the side of the head will tidy that up pretty quickly. From face on, when we look at the pull, the flexing of the arms, the flexing of the lead wrist, the overtaking rate, the club passes the hands a little bit too fast. That's all going to shift the playing line to the left. When you look at players like Grant, Charlie, arms are much straighter, overtaking rate slower, lead wrist and arms don't flex as much. So once you stabilise the upper centre, that would be and tweak the setup. They would be the first two things I would look at. Keep the arms bolt straight through the hip. That will be the next phase. I'm going to now look at down the line. So I'll get the down the line footage up, and then we can start looking at various things from down the line as well. So from down the line, what we're starting to see are, again, a few little changes that need to be made at setup. I'm just going to put the box around Grant's head for reference a little bit later. Same line through the shaft and a line across the shoulder. You see Grant's shoulders are a little bit squarer than yourself. Your right shoulder protrudes forward a little bit. To alleviate this, feel like you're going to put the pressure on the underside of the right arm. So pressure point 5, squeeze the underside of the right arm against the torso. And what this will do is it will start to bring this shoulder back into alignment, allowing you to be a little bit squarer at setup, not quite as open, and again that leads to a little bit of a pull movement potentially in the downswing. You're going to remember that obviously with the golf swing, one thing leads to another, and sometimes we compensate in a different way to make up for a little flaw at setup. So, you know, these are just things and observations that would lead to the sort of shot pattern that you're getting. So at P1, face on, push the hips forward, down the line, pressure point 5, right arm against the torso, but we want the underside of the arm against the torso to realign the shoulders. This will in turn make it a little bit easier to make the takeaway. You see your arms, your hands tend to elevate a little bit too fast, and the club gets pushed behind you a little bit. What we'd want to see is the pressure points maintained against the right, or the right arm against the side. The hands will trace more of an inward path, and that in turn will prevent the club rolling behind you quite as quick. Having said that, you know, is that a massive problem? You're pulling the ball, you're getting a heel strike. Not really. The shoulder alignment would be the pull aspect of it. The takeaway will just become tidier and a little bit more efficient. You can see the head starting to move up and above the box. And this is where your heel strike's going to kick in. Get back into flexion nicely, and then extend way too fast. It's almost like the turn doesn't continue. We're a little bit too chest onto it at impact. Would want to see everything opening up a little bit more through impact so that we can maintain our inclination to the ground. So this is more to do with a heel strike. If we start to maintain our inclination through the ball with the setup that we've got, where the hips are back and the shoulders are open, then we're going to pull everything way left. So that move that you see in there, my initial assumption would be that that's, and I've seen this on a regular basis, it's a counteracting measure to prevent the club potentially coming across the ball. We start to push up too fast. Problem with that is when the body starts to turn, so we're turning, getting back into flexion, and now it's almost like the turn starts to calm down, the extension kicks in, and the problem is now, because the hips and the body are not opening up, the hip slide isn't being directed in the right manner, so it cannot offset the amount of extension that you create during the downswing. Arms get thrown away from you a little bit. There's your heel strike. Add to that potentially lead wrist flexing, arms bending, with open shoulders and hips back. That's your pull. Like I say, I mean, it doesn't look like you, to me, come over the top of it at all. You may feel from sort of 6.5 to 7.5, if that lead wrist really starts to flex, that would pull everything out in front of you and could give you the sensation that you've come over the top of it. So when I look at that follow through position, it's going to take you back to, we'll go as the hands start to appear, and we'll take Grant to the same position. We can see there's a marked difference in the inclination to the ground. Now here's the interesting bit. If you turn, you can see Grant's belt buckle is facing his target. So if you turn and slide and extend at the correct rate, you will maintain your inclination to the ground. So in other words, you'll have more right tilt in your finish. If we don't turn enough, we extend too much, and the hip slide, if you will, just gets lost in the whole process, then we will lose our inclination to the ground. And obviously that conjures up this idea of thinking about sliding and turning and extending. You can also flip it on its head. If you maintain your right tilt into the finish, then the tilt, if you will, the side bending, the hip slide, the extension, the turning, must all be being carried out at the correct rate. So my advice here would be, once we've gone through the detail of what's involved, in the finish, max out your right tilt. So the key thought in the through swing would be to have the maximum amount of right tilt in your exit. So we want you tilted over to the right more, like you see with Grant, which would have you looking at the golf ball with your eyes angled over rather than very level as we see here. And that will give you that sensation of staying down and through the shot, maybe getting work in the lower body, working underneath you more in the through swing. So my advice at this stage for you would be to tidy up P1, make the setup a little bit more appropriate, have a few less pull pieces in there, so push the hips forward, apply some pressure to the underside of the right arm. Once you're in that sort of position, hit balls where you try to max out the right tilt in the finish and keep the arms bolt straight. Whilst doing that, you may want to have a little cane to the side of your head just to stabilise the upper centre, and that should start to tidy things up a little bit. I'd love to see some footage of you, if possible, actually practicing that in that method, in that way, in that manner, with the cane in place, maxing out the right tilt, keeping the arms straight, with the hips pushed forward. If you can get a little bit of footage across to me, that'd be absolutely great. And like I say, if you've got any questions, then feel free to just bounce me an email and we can discuss it online. Look forward to watching this one progress. Hope that helps. Thanks for your support online. Glad that the things help you and any of your students. And like I said before, feel free to arrange a class over in the States, because I know it'll be a lot warmer than it will be in the UK over the coming months. Have a great time. Enjoy your golf.